So before we jump into all the values on the unit circle and talking about sine and cosine and all of that fun stuff, we're going to look at these special right triangles. So 45, 45, 90 triangle always works the same way. The values of the lengths of the sides always have the same ratio. "45, 45, 90 triangle, because the two angles are congruent to each other, this is an isosceles triangle, which means that this side and this side will always be congruent to each other. So whatever this value is, this value will also be. And if we use the Pythagorean theorem, x squared plus x squared equals the hypotenuse squared, we would get 2x squared equals the hypotenuse squared. Now, to figure out what the hypotenuse is going to equal, I would take the square root of each side. So the hypotenuse would equal, the square root of x squared would just be x, and then the square root of 2 would be the square root of 2. So whatever the length of the sides are, the hypotenuse is always going to be that value times the square root of 2. Going back to the idea of the unit circle, our hypotenuse would have to be 1 because that would be the radius of the circle. So to go from knowing the hypotenuse to knowing the side length, we would divide by the square root of 2 for the two sides. Now, we can't leave it as 1 over the square root of 2 because we can't have a square root in the denominator. We would rationalize that. So we'd have to multiply by the square root of 2. So I would get square root of 2 over 2. And same thing here. So that's where we get our two values for the unit circle. Now, for today, what we're going to do is practice just, if you know a side length or a leg length, to get the hypotenuse length, you multiply by the square root of 2. If you know the hypotenuse, you divide by the square root of 2 to get the leg length. Okay. A 30, 60, 90 typically we work off the shortest leg. Okay. So we typically call this some variable. Whatever this short leg is, the hypotenuse is always twice as much. So that part's not too hard. Those two are just either multiply or divide by 2, right? But the third side, again, if we did Pythagorean theorem on this, we could figure out that the longer leg is x times the square root of 3. For the purposes of today's assignment, what you're going to do, obviously read the directions. So it says find the missing side length. And in this one, it actually gives you that they're 45, 45, 90s. But look at the triangle, figure out whether it's 45, 45, 90 or 30, 60, 90. That's going to be kind of your first step. Both of these are 45, 45, 90s. Okay. Once you've determined whether it's 45, 45, 90 or 30, 60, 90, figure out what they're giving you and what you need to find. Okay. So in A, they're giving us the sides, the legs. Okay. So if you're given the leg, you are going to multiply by the square root of 2 to find the hypotenuse. So y is the hypotenuse. So to find y, we're just going to take our side length times the square root of 2. So in B, they're giving us the hypotenuse is 5. So to find the leg length, we are going to divide by the square root of 2. So x is going to equal 5 divided by the square root of 2. Now we can't leave it that way, right? We still have to rationalize that. We can't leave a square root in the denominator. So multiply by square root of 2 over 2, or square root of 2 over square root of 2, and rewrite that as 5 times the square root of 2 divided by 2. So again, when you're looking at these problems, determine whether you have a 45, 45, 90, or a 30, 60, 90. We have a 30, 60, 90. Always find the shortest leg first. So depending on what you're given, so if you're given the hypotenuse, you just have to divide by 2 to find the shortest leg. If you're given the longer leg, you have to divide by the square root of 3. So what are we given? We are not given the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is unknown. We are given the taller leg. The side across from 60 is going to be your longer leg. So in order to find our short leg, we need to take our longer leg and divide by the square root of 3. But of course, we can't leave it like that. So we have to multiply by square root of 3 over square root of 3. Always get rid of that square root in the denominator. Once you have the shortest leg, you either have to find the hypotenuse or the longer leg. Okay? So to find the hypotenuse, so once we have this shorter leg, to find the hypotenuse, multiply by 2. So we were given the longer leg. We divided by the square root of 3 to get our shortest leg. To find the hypotenuse, we just take this 4 square roots of 3 over 3 and divide, or multiply by 2, which all that's going to do is double the number out front. 8 square roots of 3 over 3. Okay. Now, if we were given the hypotenuse and we found the shorter leg, if we needed to find the longer leg, instead of finding the hypotenuse, we would multiply by the square root of 3 instead.